Legend of the Wood of the Cross. When Adam feels death approaching, he sends his son, Seth, to the earthly paradise for solace. From the tree of life, Seth receives 3 twigs. The angel Michael allows him a glimpse of paradise. There he sees a child crying on the top of a tree that first was dry and then became green. The child weeps over the fratricide. He promises salvation in 5,000 years. Back home, Seth plants the twigs on the grave of his erstwhile deceased father. In a vision, Moses is asked to go and get the tree at Hebron. So he does. He makes the bitter waters of Marah sweet with the tree, and later plants it in the land of Moab where he dies. Again in a vision, also David is asked to pick up the tree in the land of Moab. So he does. On his way to Jerusalem, he heals a leper and turns an Ethiopian into a white man by merely touching them with the tree. At home, the tree roots so deeply that David has to divert the city walls. Beneath the tree there came a well. David composes his psalms at the tree's stem. The tree becomes really big and beautiful by the time of Solomon. Solomon cuts down the tree for the construction of the temple, but the wood constantly changes its dimension, refusing to fit the temple. Neglected, the wood appropriately is arched over the river Kedron. It is on this wooden bridge that the meeting between Solomon and the Queen of Sheba takes place. She foretells that the wood will one day support the Messiah, who shall be executed by the Jews. Filled with mistrust, Solomon tosses the wood into a puddle, the Piscina Probatica, today near St. Anne's. In the time of the Passion of Christ, however, the wood is found floating, and the Jews fashion a cross from it. Later, the Romans will crucify Christ on it. Hereafter follows the finding of the true cross. This is the feast of May 3rd. The story picks up again on 14 September with the feast of the exaltation of the cross. The relic of Helen was stolen by the Persian Khosrows, but Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, recuperates it in a battle, kills Khosrows, baptizes his son, and brings the relic back humbly barefooted through the Porta Aurea of Jerusalem. Thus goes the legend as it became widespread in the 13th century. This early Christian concept varied on the synthesis between the cross and the tree of life, between paradise and the sacrifice. It is known that this typological exegesis started its rampant dissemination in the 12th century. From then onwards, the cross was made part of a diachronic shadow play between the Old and New Testament. The cross was already there in its potential form in the staff of Moses, in the towel of Aaron, etc. The idea that the material of the Old Testament would effectively become the bearer of the Messiah was unfolded in the narrative since the 12th century from the book of Genesis to the Passion. The first traces of the origins of the legend are evident in the church histories of Petrus Comestor, Johannes Belathus, and Godfrey of Viterbo's Pantheon. Jacobus de Voragine names the first two as his authorities in his Legenda Aurea, circa 1260. It is most probable that the 12th century authors picked up their material from oral circuits, but monastic backgrounds can also be traced back to the 11th century, and even further back in time we find dualistic milieus, like the 9th century Bogomils. Philologists consider this milieu responsible for the syncretism between the two origins. One group originated around the figure of Seth in Greek Apocrypha, about the life of the protoplast. The other group developed around the Moses lore in mainly Slavonic manuscripts on the basis of Exodus. Another important but exclusively Slavonic feature is the story of a threefold tree withered by Lot. Isaiah's reference to the cedar, the cypress, and the pine, while making the place of my feet glorious, have always been understood as relating to the 3 types of wood that were made in the construction of the cross of Christ. In fact, this is the founding legend of the Holy Cross Monastery in Jerusalem. The legend of the wood of the cross was deeply rooted in the anthropology and mythology of the Christian world, which is evidenced by its diffusion over all the classical languages of the sacred word and in later times also in the vernaculars of Western Europe. What is the common concept and purpose of this tradition, in the light of sacred space and hierotopy? The legend follows the wood of the cross on its pilgrimage from the tree of life to its final destiny as the instrument of the Passion. The old patristic symbolic superposition of paradise with Jerusalem develops in a diachronic narrative. The selection as well as the interlace of passages based on the books of the Bible are pivoted by three mechanisms. Firstly, those passages in the OT are selected with reference to the wood, for example, or to well-known prophecies concerning the cross, the role of the Queen of Sheba, for example. The legend's theme of the Queen of Sheba as a prophetess was influenced by the Byzantine Sibylline genre. The legend of the wood of the cross alludes to the biblical passage that tells of her meeting with Solomon, but here she appears in the role of Sibyl. She is the first to venerate the wood with a foreknowledge of the Passion. Petrus Comestor, death 1178, describes her identification of the wood in the Domus Saltus. John Belleth locates the event at the bridge over the Kedron. The queen is part of a wider intercultural network. Her meeting with Solomon inspired Jewish, Islamic, and Christian apocrypha. Her proto-demonic origin connects her to Lilith, the demon queen, and Semiramis, the consort of the Assyrian king Saushaddad V, 824 to 810 BC. And as a bringer of gifts, she is associated with the three magi. Secondly, the legend of the wood of the cross was based on convictions of tradition. David and Solomon are believed to have dug important water channels in Jerusalem, thus founding the lower city, connecting it with main springs outside the city such as Gihon. Finally, also geographic particularities of the Holy Land became important features in the legend. Both Mera, Moab, and the Kedron Valley were known for their lands with natural water sources and sheltering woods. In other words, the legend of the wood is also about the primal concern of mankind, fertility, and regeneration of nature, embodied by archetypes, triangles of sacred space, a tree well mountain. In that sense, the legend of the wood defines the shifts from two concurring centers of the world, the archetypical omphalos of Semitic cosmology, the creation and death of Adam, shifts to that other omphalos of Christian cosmology, the death and resurrection of Christ. Between both omphaloi, a linear time, a time of expectation, is spread out. The legend of the wood of the cross tells about the patience of salvation. Secondly, the legend of the wood defines the very founding of Jerusalem. How a tree decided to root on that certain spot, how this rooting generated a well, how one king gave the well a wall in honor of God, and finally how the other king gave the hill a house for God. Thirdly, the legend of the wood develops the old vertical Paleo-Christian metaphors between paradise and Jerusalem into a linear determination of biblical time and space. This determination is reviled from without, indeed, from divine hierophany. The biblical kings and protagonists act unconsciously in the divine conspiracy. Only Seth and the Queen of Sheba are gifted with the secret knowledge of the Messiah and his crucifixion, a secret knowledge that mirrors the necessity of nature itself.